All right. Welcome back to another episode of Better with Context. And I'm your host, Joe McNamara. And joining me today is just me, just my thoughts. So to jump into it, this week I was kind of thinking about the typical challenges that a ton of marketing professionals, meet. A lot of mistakes that we make early in our careers, and sometimes we continuously make them because we don't stop to think long enough about what the outcome, the projected outcome is, and instead we can get pretty caught up on the process and the output. But to clarify that, what I'm really getting at is when I was thinking about content, I was reviewing a strategic document with my team late last week, and one of the great things about strategy documents when you make them or you build them correctly is, number one, you never want to make them super rigid. I think one of the best things that you can do is actually you can be aspirational with your strategy and try and figure out, if we had an absolute banner year, here's kind of the output, or here's what we would expect to be able to accomplish. But more times than not, what ends up happening is you probably end up somewhere in the middle versus, way out in front. But, the same can apply for things like content plans. I think the difference, especially with strategy, at the strategic level versus, tactical, is output. And so, one of the things that, I've seen constantly, I've definitely covered it previously, but it's this idea of, content is king, and you just have to submit, and try and, volume your way into relevance, into, overall remarkability. And in full transparency, what ends up happening is as soon as you trade quality for that higher quantity, you start losing trust almost immediately. One of the ways that I've kind of seen it summed up is, trust is truly earned through relevance. It's not through repetition. Not to say that, you like everything that you're going to post is so high in value that you should expect to go viral on everything. That's not what I'm saying. But really what I'm getting at is, trust is earned through relevance, meaning, people don't normally remember how often you post, but they will remember what made them stop scrolling. And so if you dive into that, what you realize is that, people's time and people's attention are at a critical premium when it comes to, the significant onslaught of just, a ton of input, a ton of noise. And, when you are trying to cut through that noise, relevance builds authority faster than anything else, especially visibility. And it's not to say that you shouldn't be consistent or that you shouldn't, set goals in terms of how to cadence your work. By all means, like that's where you get into your content calendars. It's where you get into, some of the other, content processes that keep you and your team on track, and can certainly, help to deliver on, whatever the performative expectations are. But what I would say is, posting daily without like insightful, information just is just more noise. It's very different than, say, somebody who's maybe only posting once a week or maybe twice a week, but they're doing it from the perspective of my content holds value and it's allowing me to help build my following in a way that resonates with my audience, right? Like at the end of the day, like audiences really crave depth, right? And, a smart point of view will earn trust so much faster and so much more organically than, some generic, piece, 5 ways to hack blank, right? Like, yeah, you might garner like a few seconds of attention, but everyone else is doing that. And so the probability that somebody's going to stop and say, "Oh yeah, I remember Joe, building that guide, and it made me really think," or that listicle or whatever it may be. Like, come on, let's get serious. But the other piece of it too is, when you really set your sights on building high impact content, more times than not, what ends up happening is you've taken the time to strategically plan how you want to structure that content that leads to a much longer shelf life, as an example. Like, and I've talked about this in the past, kind of this topic led content approach, but if you have one strong piece of content, more times than not, you can probably slice that into anywhere from 5 to 15 different assets, and you can use those across social, whether it's, and if you want to kind of double your chances, you start from a video perspective. So between, a topic led, content strategy, and then from a mode, you're using video as kind of your baseline for everything. What you end up with is you've got this opportunity where you've got a full recorded video that you can post produce, and you can throw that up on, a long form social platform like YouTube. But at the same time, you can clip out, some really good sound bites. And there you go. You can optimize them specifically for social. You might take the audio from the full length clip and have it transcribed. Number one, basic video 101 tells us that, you want to provide closed captions for all of your video content, short or long, just because of the increasing percentage of people that are probably scrolling through their feeds, even right now, that don't have their volume on, right? I mean, how many of us have kind of laid in bed and gone through, scroll after scroll on Insta or, on LinkedIn, but you don't want to wake up your significant other, or, you're not by yourself. And so just kind of playing random, videos with volume on just doesn't necessarily seem like the most appropriate thing to do. All that saying, like, outside of the video 101 component, one of the other things that happens is you can take that transcript and then you can start to build, specific elements from that. So like a carousel, right? You may actually be able to take like a sound bite or a clip and turn it into like a 4 or 5 or 6 slide carousel, where it allows you to kind of, if you want, you can go a little bit deeper on the topic, but it also gives you a different mode to, again, connect with your audience members that may not be in a position where they can watch your video, but they can read what you're putting up on those slides. And it kind of goes on and on. The list goes on and on, right? Like, you get into blogs, you get into email campaigns. At the end of the day, it's just about, figuring out what's the best content mix for your audience, and then optimizing that against, what you're creating. So, and like, I think about what I'm doing right now. This is maybe a 20-minute ordeal endeavor. I know the last two have been about 20 minutes. I hope we're in and out before 20 minutes. But when I sit down to do these, one of the things that I do is I probably spend 15, 20 minutes ahead of time just to kind of think through, okay, what is it that I really want to convey? I have an idea in terms of the high level topic. I may jot down a few, sub bullets or, things that I want to make sure that I hit. But ultimately, I want to make sure that what I'm creating is actually worth your time, is worth you listening, is worth you reading, or, anything else that I'm doing with it. But I think the other thing too is it's kind of split along these two decision trees. The first is, figuring out how can I be thoughtful when it comes to my posts and creating, ongoing conversation, whether it's in comments or, am I going to reach out into your messages or try and join in on a much longer thread. Sometimes I pull a lot of inspiration from those threads, and whether I'm engaging with an individual or a few folks, I seem to always find myself just kind of chuckling, laughing, agreeing. But sometimes at the same time, I shouldn't say at the same time, but sometimes, I look at it and it's like, wow, I had not thought about this through that lens. So that's kind of one topic tree, but then the other is like, do I cover something that's a little bit more evergreen, right? The challenges or the frameworks or personas or points of view. Ultimately, you do your homework as it relates to what you know about your audience. And if you can consistently kind of hit the challenges on the head, there's a much higher chance that you're going to garner the attention that you're looking for. I think the other thing to remember too is we're not trying to boil the ocean here. You really should not be all things to everyone. In fact, if you are, you're probably missing the opportunities in front of you to really connect with what I would consider your true target audience. And I get it, for some of us that are in product or some of us that are in, solutions, you feel as though your product or your solution is for everyone and everyone has an applicable purpose and how they'd want to, how you would want them to interact with your stuff. I'm not going to sit here and argue the validity of, whether your product is made for an underwater basket weaving, group out of, I don't know, the South China Sea. But at the same time, I'd be very interested to know how, you have that group, but then you also have, a group of Wall Street investors or, folks that really kind of span and they really have very little in common in terms of what they share. I always kind of struggle with this concept of, we're so many things to so many different people. It's like, no, in reality, if you can be the thing for a few people, and by a few, I mean, whatever your target set is, I have seen time and time again where that's way more successful than, trying to, again, go after everybody, going a mile wide, but an inch deep. It doesn't work. And as it relates to, volume content, if you're really trying to extend yourself and spread yourself, over that mile, kind of two things happen. Number one, relevancy kind of goes out the window, as does resonance, because again, you have so much ground to cover that it's very difficult for you to kind of keep up with the actual expectations from a volume perspective. And that's not even like flooding the market. That's just truly trying to have some kind of coverage. And what you find is that your team ends up spending way more time just trying to produce content than it actually does like trying to strategize around which content is actually going to resonate best. Some of the other kind of pressures that come out of that are, people just feeling like they're rushed, right? They're led to rush content with very little to no clear message. And again, at that point, it's kind of just talking to talk. We have this conversation more often than I'd care to admit, but I mean, it's still relevant. And that is, are we doing what's right by our customers? Are we taking our audience into account when it comes to our content planning, our strategic deployment or kind of delivery of that content? And I mean, sometimes I think it's healthy for everybody to just kind of say, time out, let's take a look. We're posting too much. Or on the flip side, we're going really deep on this stuff, but we're not really optimizing what we should be. We're losing our audience midway through because there's just too much here for us to deliver in one gulp. But when you kind of focus on that perfect blend of value and volume, what you end up with is a much more balanced level of engagement, a growing organic level of trust. And quite frankly, like more people are actually going to care what you have to say. Even if you feel like the number of folks that care about what you have to say is less, if you can make a true impact and emotionally resonate with them, you're going to be in a much better position, whether they're in the buying cycle now or they are down the road. You're that much more likely to kind of be top of mind and be the folks that they're going to think of when they encounter that challenge that you just talked about, instead of, 5 ways to whatever, shine your shoes, right? Maybe that works in some cases, but I don't know how many people are really struggling with, challenges that are that superficial and kind of that high level. And I think the other thing too, for folks outside of our marketing space are, the folks on the other side of the aisle, right? Quality content, in my opinion, really helps support your sales team a lot better. One of the things that sales teams are constantly trying to prove and try to establish is relevance. They want to be able to send something to a prospect that's not just a filler asset. Like it's something, if you're committed to the sales process and you're committed to building that relationship as a salesperson, like I want to find new and more valuable pieces of information that are packaged in a way that are perfect for you, for somebody who, I'm trying to establish that relationship and build that rapport in order to kind of walk with you down this journey of, uncovering whatever the solution is to your challenge. And if I'm good at it, it's not going to feel like a sales pitch at all. But in order to do that, like one of the things that I'm going to need a deep, toolbox is, high quality, relevant content. And, examples like this, strong point, proof of value or, just concept is great. But if you can compound that with something like a case study or, maybe a short testimonial or something where it's an anecdotal example that can help bolster the message that you're sending across, like in an email, then it's less about, hey, I have to rely on you trusting what I'm emailing you or what I'm saying to you, within the copy of my email. But at the same time, like, here's a prime example of somebody that was going through the exact same challenge that you have. And here's how it turned out for them when they worked with us, right? Or, whatever it may be. At the end of the day, like, content truly teaches us a lot about relationships, and great content that teaches or explains, very complicated or complex processes can help win respect in longer sales cycles too. I've kind of worked across spaces where, sometimes the sales process is very short. It could be, days to weeks, and other times it's months to years. And so the question becomes, well, what do you do when the velocity of your buyer's journey is kind of slowed down? And my answer is, it's not necessarily about going through a checklist process. It's not like, oh, well, we're trying to move them from stage A to stage B. Again, like I said before, like, if you're taking a valid approach and a customer-centric approach to the relationships you're building, it really is not going to feel like the typical buyer's journey or kind of this process where you move from stage to stage. It's going to feel a lot more like you're on a quest, or you're on this walk together with. If you're the salesperson, you should almost try and become that sales Sherpa, right? The guy that can either answer the question or very upfront, very quickly say, you know what, I don't have the answer for that, but I know somebody that does. And let me get you connected with so-and-so from a different part of our organization where you can get all of your answers, you can get all of your questions addressed. And then let's come back and let's talk about it and let's figure out what next steps look like. Like, even there, like, non-committal. And again, I don't claim to be like a sales genius or a guru, but at the same time, like, people are people. And if you can treat them with respect, and you can treat them with humility, and you can treat them with honesty, they're way more receptive to at least have a conversation with you. Let alone, want to buy something, especially, in some cases, big dollar, level things. And then the last part that I would say is, the algorithm favors signals of depth, not just activity. And so, I'm constantly seeing this stuff, especially on LinkedIn, where it's like, I wake up in the morning and I do, my affirmations, and then I get on LinkedIn and I comment 20 to 30 times a day. And that way I'm more relevant and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, but again, you turn something that was predominantly supposed to be and is designed to be a community building exercise, and you tried to game it in a way where, oh, well, I did it 30 times, so therefore I should be rewarded with more attention from people that I'm trying to solicit. And in reality, like, I just don't see how that's any different from, going through the motions. Like, if you're in a relationship, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like an intimate one, but in any relationship, like, if all you're doing is going through the motions, like, people are going to smell that immediately. And quite frankly, the ones that are smart are going to say, I'm not wasting my time with this joker. Like, I'm going to go and find somebody that cares and can actually, help me along my way, along my journey with my challenges and my aspirations. In the same time, or in the same vein, like, high quality content should encourage that real interaction. It's not just about your likes. It's not just about kind of the superficial, interaction that we see so frequently on these major social channels. And I mean, even folks that have these massive followings, you know, I find it difficult to really wrap my head around this concept of like, as your following continues to grow, like how connected are you truly with, your fans or with your audience? And I get it. In some cases, it's just kind of inevitable. You insert your pop star, your, sports athlete, or, your major leader, world leader. That's bound to happen. But I think that also kind of comes with a much different set of expectations. And for the majority of us that are kind of just hanging out, trying to figure out how to get through life not being famous, the emphasis that I would put on relationships could not be any higher. In full transparency, I think that's the number one thing that will make or break any kind of campaign, whether it's a sales or marketing campaign. Have you taken the time to truly address your audience and to understand what their pain points are? Can you solve those pain points in a way that feels organic and feels genuine? Not because you're trying to put on a show, but because you're genuinely invested in helping them overcome or kind of figure out what the solution is, what the next step is. So in the same way, if I was going to wrap things up, which I should, your content is a direct reflection of that. And the more focused you can be on relationships and the less focused you are around volume or, vanity, the better off you're going to be.